Welcome to Bonehead Weekly. We are here with a bunch of writers, and as Stephen King has always said, what is crazier than a writer? Nothing. Actually, I was going to say nothing than a shithouse rat, but I didn't want to insult anybody with this. We are excited. I do want to say that Dr. Applegate and Dr. Thomas were both late, even though they scheduled this between the two of them. Thank you all. Dr. Thomas was extremely late.
Actually, originally I said 9:15, just for the record. If you go back and check your emails, Joe, you'll see it says 9:15.
Yeah, I figured the 8 o'clock was padding.
Yeah, that's what I thought too, but evidently Joe doesn't read.
No. No, and it's funny that we're talking to a bunch of writers today about this.
We did establish that already, so it's on record.
Yeah, that's
or
true.
It's not. We're recording it. Busted.
So what I'm going to do is go around the room, introduce each one of you really quick, and then if you could, Dr. Thomas, talk a little bit about the book, and then you and Brandon, can you talk a little bit more about it, and we'll go from there. Okay. So I want to introduce Mr. Eric Ragland. Did I say your name correctly? What is on your shirt, sir?
Yes, you did.
Planning for Burial.
Planning for Burial. It's a band.
Oh, okay.
So kind of a doomy metal band from Pennsylvania.
I am so old, but I am familiar with Pennsylvania. All right. Miss Wendy Wagner is down there. How are you doing?
Excellent.
I've been trying. She was giving me a compliment on my posters, and I've been trying to read the books off her shelf. Is there a copy of Sleeping Beauties back there between Owen and Stephen King?
Yeah, and it's autographed even. It's the only autographed Stephen King book that I have, and it's like a little miracle and like my total treasure.
Did you get it at one of those talks where there were so many that they were giving away?
Yeah. So like at the end of the event here in Powell's in Portland, like everybody got their copy of the book and like only random people got theirs signed. And I like opened it up and I burst into like happy tears.
When this is over with, I will tell you how I got my original One Sheet Creepshow signed by. It's signed by him and Joe Hill. That's right. All right.
Cool.
Oh, that's okay. This show's about you all, not me. Drew Huff, how are you today?
Pretty good. A little nervous. Drank too much coffee, but I'm super stoked, honestly.
Let's try some scotch. That'll make you feel better. I enjoyed the clock right behind your head. I was looking, it was like just a clock. She's concentrating.
I know. I was wondering if I should take it off the wall, and I was just like, you know what? Fuck it.
Yeah, we say that a lot.
There goes our 5-year-old crowd. Thanks, Drew.
It's a good reminder that my life is slowly ticking away. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, the little bastard shouldn't be up this late, even though it's not live anyway. K.A. Wiggins, I have to admit, I'm going to compliment each one of your stories, but I was sitting there going, just how long does it take to save little pieces of yourself to get onto a whole pound?
I mean, you have to try it and let us know.
You're the writer, ma'am. I'm just saying, you're the writer.
You think I do research? I just make that shit up.
No,
come on. It wouldn't take that long.
I have no idea.
10 years or something, like the average, I feel like it wouldn't be that bad.
It's just
how much does each of us produce in a year? It's got to like add up, right?
If Joe stood up, listened to Twist and Shout, it would take a grand total of 30 seconds.
So
that's an obscure fat joke, by the way. All right. So, James Thomas, you and Brandon want to talk about the book real quick?
Well, I mean, I think Brandon's the editor when it makes sense. I mean,
why, James? You're fucking dead weight. You're more than 200 pounds of stuff I could just trade for shit for a devil. All right, Mr. Applegate.
Yeah.
You have edited a book of short stories, but it has a different twist. So, can you talk about it?
Yeah. Happy to do it, man. So yeah, you're right. I edited a book called, and I'm still reeling from the idea that I edited a book, by the way. I wrote one book and then I edited one book. So I'm kind of new to the whole bit. But I edited a book called All a Dream, and it is an anthology of, as the title says, bad horror tropes done right. Now, that's a little bit inflammatory. I don't really think any of the tropes in here are necessarily bad. And I don't necessarily believe in bad tropes. I believe in tropes done badly and tropes done well. So, it's my hope that all the tropes in this book are done well, and I believe they are. And yeah, I got to work with some incredible writers, some of my heroes, saw some amazing stories come through. Some of the people in this room have written some of the best fiction I've ever read. So yeah, I'm really stoked to be here and talk about it.
And real quick, over your shoulder, I believe there happens to be the cover of the book framed right. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, my wife got me that. Yeah, here. Hold on. Since I don't have a hard copy yet, this is the closest I've got. So there it is.
Oh, that is beautiful.
That is beautiful. If you guys are listening to us on SoundCloud, check out the YouTube video if you get a chance to look at the cover. And I think he cut out a little bit. It was All a Dream, an anthology of bad horror tropes done right. And when you were saying, well, I thought you were about to say bad horror tropes done wrong is what you were going to say earlier. Going around.
Nope, definitely done right in this case.
So I have some just preliminary, really softball bullshit. Anybody can ask questions. And the first one is how much leeway did you have? How did you go about selecting specifically the 4 beautiful folks that we have on our show today? And how did you go about the submissions of that? Did you reach out to people?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of my favorite people in the whole wide world is Laurel Hightower. Tell her she's an asshole for me, please. We're close. Our kids play together. She's been on Bonehead for several times, and the title of her short story, "Fuck This Shit Manor," is perfection. I haven't read it yet.
Isn't it just chef's kiss? It's perfect.
Well, if you know where it is. Yeah. Yes, it is. So I'm just kind of curious, how did everyone get involved? And maybe we want to go around in each, or just tell us your process, and then we can ask everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kick it off by saying that, to start off the anthology, it was just kind of weird. It was a Discord chat between me and a few other writers sitting there trying to come up with the worst ideas for horror anthologies we could possibly come up with. It was just a goof around moment. And I brought up this one, and Eric was actually in that chat. Hi, Eric. But we came up with a number of them, some of them really, really horrible. And this one fell out of my mouth. And then we were just talking about, we made fun of it for a little bit. And then we immediately started also talking about the possibilities of it. It was a neat idea. And so from there, it was an open call for the most part. I invited a few folks, Wendy being one of the folks that I invited directly, but everybody else was part of the open call. We got over 400 submissions to this thing, which is kind of huge for a smallish thing like this. I was very excited about it, and also overwhelmed by the huge influx of emails. But I'll let you guys talk about how y'all thought of your story ideas and sent in.
Really quick, let's take a second and pat ourselves on the back, ladies and gentlemen. Over 400, and you beat out the competition. Now, we all can't be as special as Wendy, who got a special reach out. But let's start with Wendy, though. How did you know about which? Did you know exactly as soon as he says, "I think you should do this. This is the story I'm going to do. I'm going to do The Devil's Morning," and we're going to talk about a lady who's just got not only regular issues but existential issues. I don't know how much you want me to give away of these stories, because there's each one of them has their twist, right?
Well, I had actually started working on a short story right before pandemic, like literally like the week before everything went into lockdown. I had gone to my writing group's like regular write-in at our favorite little tea shop. And I really wanted to write a story inspired by this totally creepy song. It's called Scarecrow by the band McCafferty, which is like normally like a Midwest emo band. But this song has like this really like creepy country kind of sound. It just really made me think of like weird Western stuff. And so that day, I just sitting at the coffee shop, like played that song over and over and over again and tried to write a story. And then we went into lockdown, and I didn't do anything else with this that I just written by hand. It just like had sat around for a couple of years, basically. And so when Brandon emailed me, I was like, wait a minute. some of the things I was doing and the directions I was taking, the notes for this story that I started so long ago could really work with the whole notion of this bad tropes vision. And so I just like sat down and just like ripped what I had created to like shreds and reassembled it. And I really liked what I put together. It was super fun. So I was like really relieved when I sent it to Brandon, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this is just what I'm looking for." So it was great.
That's so cool. All right, let's
And
who
you
should
just gave me real quick. You just gave me a new song to obsess about because I was listening to it while you were talking, and I am amazed by it.
Isn't it creepy? It's so
It's
good.
awesome.
so part of that should be a compliment. The other part of it is, what do you mean were you listening to this shit while she's talking? What an asshole.
No.
I'm so glad we invite guests to the show, Chad, for you to really show up. That's great, Chad. Thanks.
You missed the whole thing about where I was reading these stories, listening to Albert Fish podcast earlier, James. I can multitask like a son bitch.
I wouldn't say I missed it, Chad.
All right, let's go to Drew since Drew's next. How did what
Okay.
happened here? Did you submit?
I did. So this was one of the first forays into short fiction that I had done. I had just finished writing up my novel my novel manuscript. I'm kind of shopping around right now, Freeburn. And I sort of needed, not like a palate cleanser, but after you do a really long project like that, you sort of just need some short little things to tide you over until you get to the next idea. So I saw this anthology and it just was like, yes, I finally have an outlet to take this trope of serial killer from the psych ward and twist it. I always kind of hated that trope, really bothered me, got under my skin, but I'd sort of been waiting for the right moment to subvert that. So I saw it, I just had that feeling, sat down on the computer, and I was just kind of pounding out some ideas. And I also kind of was like, okay, what about loser stoner? What about this trope? And I sort of just worked some puzzle pieces around until I came up with a good plot. And then it just came out. It took me, I would say, a little bit to get the entire story and kind of realize that it's also in a way about the slow realization that your childhood and your past is not what it seems. There's sort of a sadness to it.
That and
it was super fun.
The phrase that comes
I
to
will
mind.
say, and I won't give away. I mean, most of the stories in the book are going to have some level of twist to them. Like I did not see the ending of that coming. I wasn't sure what the ending was going to be, but I didn't think it was going to be that. So
thank you. Yeah, it was a fine balancing line between, because I was trying to sort of weave in little hints like, okay, this guy isn't responding the way a normal person would respond here and there, but I didn't want to foreshadow it too obviously, you know?
Well, I was kind of curious if you don't mind talking a little bit about, because for you other three writers, you wrote the gender that clearly, but you not only did you use what I call rearranging the furniture, which we do in our mind, right? It's like the couch was over there in my childhood, but it really wasn't. You've rearranged it. You wrote from can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, you wrote it from a male perspective.
Honestly, I think some of that was, so Freeburn, again, still shopping it around. I worked for a really long time on that, and Freeburn is also, it's pretty, I mean, obviously the plot's different, but it's also written from a male point of view in deep first person point of view. So like, if you liked this short story, I mean, you'd love Freeburn. For me, I guess it's easy to, and maybe this is just because I'm queerer than a $3 bill, but I guess it hasn't been very difficult for me to write from that point of view. I've never really had an issue writing in either gender per se, but yeah, it just kind of came to me.
Okay.
And honestly, like, you know, in the media, we see when women are portrayed with mental illness, it's like you're supposed to feel sorry for them 9 times out of 10. They're a waif, they're a victim. You see a dude with schizophrenia, you're supposed to be scared of him. So I also think gender it was important to me that this was a guy. This guy in any other horror flick would have been some kind of budding serial killer just waiting to explode. And yeah.
Yeah,
Norman Bates. I mean,
Nor-
the classic.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking of, oh, what's his name from Black Christmas, Buddy? Billy from Black Christmas is another great example of the crazy psycho ward escapee, right? Or the Silent Night, Deadly Night. Why are crazy people always out on the holidays? Anyway, Kay, you couldn't answer my question earlier of just how many fingernails and whatnot. I'm curious because that question has stuck with me now for a little while of, oh my goodness, if I had to give a pound of flesh, exactly how would I do it? So I'm a big dude. I was thinking some sort of liposuction or some sort of cosmetic surgery because there's not a lot of details.
Shortcut, man. That's too fast. That'd be easy.
Yeah, I don't want it difficult. Who wants to work hard anyway? So
Honestly, I'm screwed on the dandruff department.
That's
no,
fair. Yeah.
but
you lose skin all over your body. So I mean, don't get too locked down to your paradigm.
no, it's all right. He's very scaly.
There you go. Exactly. Okay, so I'll give you the full on behind the scenes of this.
Thank you.
I'd been doing Christmas shopping and I bought, do you know what, like, have you ever seen pedicure tools? It was a pedicure thing for someone. And it's like a little cheese grater for your skin, basically. And I was like, holy crap, you gotta like get a lot of skin off over the course of, and I was thinking about, where does that go? And like, how does it go back into, the circle of life and contribute? I mean, it's just going down the drain. That's a waste. So it'd be good if you could do something constructive with it. So like, why not pay off your debt to a devil who's gonna, eat you alive?
But the best joke is her ridiculous requests.
Oh yeah. No, it's yeah.
Yeah. Right. I don't want to give too much away to people who haven't written it, but or who haven't read it, but it's pretty funny, especially if you're a writer, right? Or know anything about writing and publishing, because you all have made a fortune at doing this, right, Brandon?
Oh yeah, I'm rolling in it, man.
Yeah.
He's rolling in something.
I will say that there's a few tropes that I really hoped people would send me some version of. When I started the project, Drew, I really hoped that people would write the kinds of tropes that you did from a different perspective and flip them. There was a moment when I was like, somebody please send me a deal with the devil trope that is flipped on its head somehow. And you didn't really flip it on its head per se, but you made such a clever way for this person to get out of trouble that it was very fun. I laughed out loud, like my wife heard me from the other room when I got to the end of that one.
See, but you're the first editor who told me that and bought the story. The rest of them were like, writer's jokes. No one wants to read this shit. They're like, it's funny, but no one will get it. So I mean, time will tell.
Well, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll happily be the first person to buy that.
Love it. It's great.
Eric, you're not last. You are last, but you're definitely not least. Can you tell me about your short story? Because I actually, as I was reading it, because you've already been around us long enough, especially when the pitchfork is going through the bear traps. I know you wrote it as a different, but I started giggling because I built it up as a Naked Gun kind of thing in my head.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
you weren't going for that effect. That's all me. I am putting
No, that's
that
all
out
right.
there.
I think
Yes.
as soon as it left and entered Brandon's inbox, the story belonged to someone else. So
Right.
you interpret it however you want. I think it's one of the bleakest things I've ever written, but if it gave you a laugh, then I'm glad about that too.
Well, that part of it, the other part about people having to endure hate and misery for no other thing than being themselves did not make me laugh at all. But me building up this idiot trying to get across here and then looking, it's not what you intended, but I did find that slightly funny.
With this one though, I do love the challenge of, I mean, as soon as Brandon put up the call, I was like, oh yeah, I love this challenge. Like, this is something that I honestly think is valuable to do with most stories to some regard. Like, okay, if I'm going to use a trope in a really prominent way, how can I, give this a interesting spin? And so I thought it was just a fun challenge. But I think also, as far as setting goes too, the story's called Bloody Nights at Hippie Cliffs. And I'm from a place in Nebraska. We have a place that is not, I wouldn't say it's like the place in the story, but it is called Hippie Cliffs. And a lot of people hang out there. I don't know that it's a gay cruising spot, but if it's not, it could be.
It should be, right?
We could make that happen, minus the other stuff that happens in the story.
Right.
So yeah, I guess that's just a little fun little background. But yeah, it took me maybe a month to write this one. I really agonized over the prose with it because I don't know. I think especially when there are settings that are Nebraska inspired, I really want to do the setting justice, and hopefully the prose did that. And yeah, I just am happy that Brandon wanted it, and it's gonna be in the book.
All right.
You told me the title of that story before I got the chance to read it, and
you knew the preliminary title too.
Yeah, I did. What was the preliminary title before you landed
it's
on
called
Bloody
Fuck
Night?
Mountain.
Yeah, Fuck Mountain.
Fuck Mountain.
And then that was a short-lived title. Yeah.
Yeah, but those couple of titles, neither one of them did well. The story did not end up being what I thought it was going to be based on those titles, but it's an incredible story.
But now I want to see an entire collection of stories, and they all just have that title. Like let that title, let 15 different authors run with that title, and let's see what happens. It could be a good time. Maybe.
I'm just saying the Boneheads would submit a story for the Fuck Mountain anthology. And it's probably not going to go where you think it's going to go.
I would be disappointed if it did.
I gotta interject. Sorry, I gotta interject because I gotta tell Eric a story because I don't get to meet people from Nebraska every day. I don't know. Joe probably doesn't remember this.
Now, part of this is because Chad's not allowed to cross state lines.
Hold on. Is this Kevin's girlfriend? Is this Kevin's girlfriend story?
No.
Then I have another story about Nebraska. Keep going.
On our very first live show, we had some people on our panel with us while we did our show. And one of the guys happened to be from Nebraska because Joe went by and asked where everybody was from. And I don't know why my brain said this, or why these words came out of my mouth. I'm like, oh, you know what they call Nebraska? And the gentleman said, what? The less moral Iowa. Nothing.
And so now that we have you on the show today, Mr. Ragland, is it false or true? Is it the less moral Iowa?
I just got back from a weekend in Minnesota, and I had to drive through Iowa both ways. And it was just a nest of depravity each time I went through. So I'm going to say Nebraska is better.
And that is where we're putting Fuck Mountain is in Iowa.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
We're going to build the fuck out of Fuck Mountain in Iowa.
Well, yeah.
Iowa, well known for its mountains.
What did you say, Drew?
Well, yeah, you just need enough people, need enough bodies.
That's true. Let the bodies hit the floor.
And on that note, I am saying good night to everybody. Good night, everybody.
It's good talking to you all. Good luck on the book. Sign all the contracts. All right. Now, the second question I have, and I'm going to let James and Chad take over a little bit, and I apologize, but this is a question I've asked many people, and I do like, there's certain folks I like to ask it of. One of them is stunt folks when we have them on the show, and another one is writers. What the fuck is wrong with you? Who wants to go first? Now, it's a very simple question.
Hey, I'm going to take this because I work with kids a lot, so that'll be great.
Go ahead. What do you do?
So for context, I'm actually the president of the Children's Writers and Illustrators of British Columbia, and parents allow me to teach their children creative writing as a extracurricular. So they pay me to do that stuff.
That's awesome.
And they stopped paying me once I started mentioning I write horror. So that's also fun. So
well, all right. So I'll bring the question down a little bit. What do you think and this is a true Stephen King story, and I've told this multiple times, but when he was young, he talks about finding some Lovecraft novels that his dad walked out on when he was young. They found them in a thing upstairs, and if you guys have heard this before, you can feel free to stop me. And he started getting, he's heard a story about Jerry Lee Lewis. He saw it when Jerry Lee Lewis was young, musician. He saw a piano, and he didn't know what it was, but he had to get at it. And he didn't know what those Lovecraft novels were, but he had to get at it. So can you guys kind of talk about a little bit about that impetus or whatever that was that got you into horror or maybe writing? I know I because I haven't read a lot of your stuff, I don't know if it varies much outside the genre, but if it is horror, I'd like to hear, why are you fucked up?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And it's a fun one because I haven't celebrated Halloween since I was 4. And I grew up in a family where you didn't do that. That was like devil worship.
I was
holiday.
religious.
Like
Yeah.
that's no good. So religious. And don't get me wrong, great family, but it just wasn't a part of my childhood. And to the extent that like if the other kids were, reading Bunnicula or whatever in your elementary school class, it was like, no, I had a different book to read because, we don't touch that stuff. So I did not have a lot of horror exposure growing up, and until fairly recently, actually. And I really thought of myself as a fantasy writer, just the way I'm marketing, the way I'm presenting things. And I get on Twitter, and there's all these horror writing people, and they're kind of awesome. And I started interacting with readers, started interacting with kind of a wider world of books, and realizing that a lot of what I love, it's not the fantasy part of fantasy. It's kind of this dark, messed up, twisted part of it. So, when everyone's getting like their asses handed to them by the monster, that's the part that I really get excited about. So I am a horror writer masquerading as a fantasy writer because I did not know what horror was until quite recently, or that it could be the less visible things. So like the gothic element of horror, some of the quiet horror is way more interesting to me than like chainsaws and zombies, which if that's your thing, that's great. But to me, that wasn't like a welcoming face of horror that I would relate to. So it's kind of been a journey, and I have trouble not including horror elements in everything I write. So I figured just like welcome it.
To thy
Go with
own
it.
self be true.
By the way, do you think that the devil's getting tired of getting blamed for Halloween? Like wouldn't it be more like Black Friday is much more a devil's holiday, right? People are getting trampled, but everybody's like, no, Halloween's bad. Sorry.
No, valid.
All right.
I was saying, no, not even Black Friday. Easter. It's about a zombie.
Oh, thanks, Chad.
No, I feel
Well,
like
there goes our
we
viewership.
have
Good
all
night,
the
everybody.
The
Black
Kentucky
Friday.
What
We've
did you
got
say?
wrath, we've got Karens, we've got gluttony, greed.
Yeah.
I mean, you walk into any Walmart on a Black Friday, oof.
Drew, all I heard was gluttony and
Yeah.
greed. Two of my
In all
favorite
fairness,
words.
though, I actually agree with that because they're also zombies.
That's
They're,
true.
they're they're pursuing something. They're not thinking. They're just going.
That's true.
50-inch flat screen.
I already have a fix.
We've
I
all
need
got
a-
our next anthology topic.
That's true. No, I'm sticking with Fuck Mountain. So who wants to go next? I want to hear. Drew, do you want to go next?
Okay. So I think my first real foray into horror, and I'd always loved stories when I was a kid. I was a bookworm. I think all of us here can relate to that. You were the kid with your nose in a book outside, all the other reindeer, all that jazz. So when I was 9 years old, I got my hands on a copy of The Shining, and I read it. That was just, I think for me, it was interesting to, I guess it's not, I kind of agree with what Kay was saying. It's not about the chainsaws and the monsters. For me, it's about how the protagonist escapes from that or defeats the monster, or worse, becomes the monster. That's interesting too, I guess. And I just liked it. I was a hardcore goth when I was in high school. My dad and I used to go to Dollar Tree and get one of those, 30 horror movies, like a box set, and we would watch and we would just try to rank them by shitty special effects, shitty CGI.
Your childhood
me-
was amazing.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
But for me, I think the reason I tend to gravitate towards horror when I write is because of the rawness of emotion and feeling. You just don't really see it in a lot of other genres. Even like a lot of romance that's marketed nowadays, it's like, and I'm not going to get on my artistic high horse. I'm not going to say that people who, you know, work blue collar jobs and get home should have to perform emotional labor every time they want to crack open a book, plumb the depths of the human psyche. But I do think it's like when I'm doing a piece of media or I'm reading a piece of media, I want to explore the human psyche. I want to go into the depth of that emotion. I'm here for authenticity and rawness and realness. And I want to explore the full spectrum of that. And unfortunately, that just tends, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, that just tends to take me into the horror genre. I think I like to use my monsters as pretty handy metaphors for mental illness, abuse, what have you. I guess to me, Stephen King mentions in his
Stop saying terrible things about his mother. Oh, good. I can stop saying terrible things about Joe's mother.
I am
Actually, that's a
apologize.
lie. Your mother's nothing but nice. It's you that's wrong.
Yes, well, you know, that's okay. I apologize for my internet going to shit. There was the last thing I got as we were recording was Stephen King says on his, and I'm assuming you were talking about on writing, but I don't know. So you go ahead.
I got the gist of it. Stephen King for life. I am very jealous of Wendy Wagner's signed copy.
Well, then I will tell you my story of Creep Show. Then when we're done, you and Wendy stay on, and I will show it to you. So, all
Okay.
right.
I was gonna say Drew and I have kind of the same history because I was like my first introduction to horror novels was, but it wasn't The Shining, it was it.
Mine was Misery.
So,
Ooh.
Yeah.
Mine
first
was the
horror-
last unicorn.
No one
keeps waking
cares.
up.
Yeah, the first horror book I ever read was Skeleton Crew.
Oh, that was
that's awesome.
that was number.
Probably 7 or 8. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my second or third one. When do you want to go next? Since you're already,
Sure.
yeah.
So I grew up in a really, really rural environment. Like up until I was 5, we lived on like a sheep ranch, and then we moved to Southern Oregon where my dad was a logger. And so pretty much my entire childhood was just full of like things like animals being butchered, car accidents, roadkill, you know, just constant, nonstop, gross, horrible thing all the time in the background of the world. And I was like a pretty lonely little kid. I had 2 older sisters, but they were a lot older. My parents were really busy with like, you know, things like going bankrupt and stuff like that. And so I was just kind of in like a low level state of like terror, I think, my whole childhood. I think we lost Joe again. Yeah, so
No, I'm totally here. I'm totally here. I was just making sure everything was working. I'm so sorry. No, you keep going. I am
Okay.
listening here. We were recording and we were good.
But by the way, real quick though, you mentioned car accidents as part of what was going on. Was there a lot of car accidents near your family's place? Are you implying that your family may have caused those car accidents? Is there another story here?
Well, there was like a really big car accident that we were in when I was a little kid, but also like 4. But we, like when we moved to Southern Oregon, we lived on this road that was like extremely narrow and windy and ran along like the side of this deep ravine. So you're just sort of like hanging on this cliff face, often in like deep fog with like, you know, log trucks like zooming by at warp speed, or like hunters going by like not being careful, and there were always people going off the road. And I mean, just and like you just hear like horrible stories like, oh yeah, that's how Pinky lost his arm when he went over the cliff and had to crawl back up it one-handed to get to the hospital. You know, that was just rural life.
Wendy is making this shit up. You remember we were talking about rearranging the furniture? She's got her story and Pet Cemetery somehow all together. Talking about Stephen King. There was a road. I had a little brother named Gage.
I just love that she picked the name Pinky.
Pinky.
He's a real guy.
Because he had none, Chad. He had none.
I was getting ready to make that.
Oh man. Anyway, so like when I found Stephen King's work as, inappropriately at 7 or 8, it just felt like homecoming, right? It's just like the normal people that I grew up with. It's nonstop white trash and peril. And
Yes.
it was just like a good and cozy place to be. And usually like the good guys won in the end. So it just felt like a safe and wonderful place to like you could be scared, but you could work through it. And that really stayed with me. And I just like kind of kept that love all growing up. And then I got into writing horror. I think I'm probably like the oldest person involved in this book, but I got involved in writing horror and it was like a big part. And then for me in 2017, I got really depressed for a lot of different reasons. And we started playing this game, a video game called Until Dawn, which is a super fun game if you play video games at all. It's just packed with like horrible things and Wendigo monsters and serial killing action and jump scares up the wahoo. And it was so riveting and so exciting. And when I would play it, I would feel alive again. It was just like so amazing. And it, like all the different things about horror just really clicked in my head at that point. It was like, I love everything about it. And I just like kind of became like a horror advocate. And so it's kind of like my whole life because now I edit I edit a horror magazine and I write horror novels. I was writing science fiction, but like after that, it was like, I'm done with science fiction. It's horror or bust.
All right. Thank you. Eric, once again, last but definitely not least, I'm curious.
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I mean, Stephen King was part of it, but I'll go with something a little different too. I was very lucky in growing up because both my parents worked as English teachers. My mom was working on her library science degree. And so they let me check out whatever I wanted from the library. And most of the time that meant me in 3rd grade checking out books about ghosts and demons and stuff. And so there's a lot of that going on. I think as far as kind of stoking the interest in horror, we had both some neighbors and then a family friend who had haunted houses. One of them had this child ghost who I still very distinctly remember them showing me the image. This was before Photoshop. She'd taken one and had it printed out, but she took a picture of this new dining room table, and in the reflection of it, you could see the reflection of a child's face. And they didn't have a child; it's just a couple who lived alone. That really fascinated me when I was a kid. And we had these other neighbors who had this ghost who. Evidently, one of the parents had been sleepwalking one night and was about to sleepwalk and fall down the stairs and woke up almost like at a 45-degree angle, being essentially like held up by the ghost. That was the story anyway. And so kind of those really stuck with me and got me interested in ghosts. And then, cryptids, demons, Stephen King, all that good stuff. Just kind of,
That 45-degree angle thing is a good story.
It is. Yeah. I remember I was so desperate as a kid to see a ghost that the one time I babysat for those neighbors, I was probably like 11 or 12 at the time. The kids were probably like, I think it was just one kid. They was maybe 4 or 5. But I remember specifically lying about a ghost story. I was like, oh yeah, like I heard like the ghost's footsteps outside the door, and I swear I heard it, like I totally did. But I was just a desperate little kid lying to get ghost cred. So discrediting that one, but I have had legitimate ghost experiences since then. So.
All right, James and Chad, your turn. All right, James and Chad, your turn.
I was gonna say, James, go.
Well, no, I wanted to say one thing. I wanted to mention is there are illustrations in the book for each story, I believe.
They're kick-ass. They're awesome.
They are, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So obviously, you all wrote the story, and then the art was developed later, I'm assuming. What was it like to see that art after, and how it connected to your story? What was your response as you go through and saw that?
I was so happy. I had like a short story rejection or something come in that day, so I was a little sad. And this is one of my first pieces of published fiction. So, you know, I'm pretty young. I'm trying to, you know, look legit to my family. I'm like, look, I swear to God, I'm published. I swear to God, guys, this is coming to fruition. So when this came in, I was just showing it to everyone. I took a screenshot of mine. I was like, Mom, look at this. Look at this. It looks like demonic Shaggy. This is amazing. And my mom actually made like a little poster for me so I could just hang it up. And yeah, it made my whole day. I showed my friends. I was just so fucking stoked. All of them look amazing.
So cool to hear. By the way, I want to stop and give some credit to the artist.
Please.
Christopher Castillo Diaz is a Peruvian artist who I met. I met him on Fiverr of all places originally, and he actually did the oil painting that was the front cover of my own story collection. But the reason why I went to him in the first place is because most of his work is most of the work that I saw of his originally, he does a lot of other stuff now, but most of the original work I saw of his was black and white sort of line drawings. And for my collection, there were going to be tentacles on it, and a lot of his art deals with tentacles. And so he does a lot of heavy metal band album covers, really is what I saw. And so that's why I went to him originally. And then I approached him about this project, and I was originally like, okay, it's going to be about 18 drawings. And I was like, okay, it's going to be like 20 drawings. And I was like, okay, it's 26 drawings. Can you do it? And Christopher, absolute consummate professional, just rolled with everything, gave me everything by the deadline that I asked for it by, and does some absolutely wildly incredible work. And so I'm so pleased. Drew, I've heard from you, I've heard from all of you guys how much you love the work that he did on this. I couldn't agree more. It's incredible work.
And the cover, I want to give credit to the cover artist. Wasn't it Evangeline Gallagher? That
Evangeline Gallagher, yes.
Beautiful. It's
bonkers, isn't it?
Good. Yes.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, if you ever get a chance to, Evangeline is very much online. Their website has a huge amount of portfolio art on it. If you ever get a chance to go on and look at their artwork, you definitely should. An incredible amount of really cool artwork. Some of it even very horror themed. I think they did some stuff from like Hereditary and stuff like that. So there's some really cool stuff on there.
So Brandon, I'm kind of curious, did he do alternates? Did you go through and pick, like he had 2 or 3 for just this short story, you got to pick, and 2 or 3, did you read the short stories first? What was the process?
You know, honestly, what I did with Christopher is I went through and I typed a short synopsis of each story and gave him a brief idea of what I thought it ought to look like. And it was really just 2 short paragraphs of information about each story, and I sent them over to him along with a copy of what existed of the book at the moment, because, you know, in case he wanted to get a little bit deeper into it. But you know, most of what you see on the page came from 1, my synopsis, and 2, the crazy stuff in Christopher's head. Like he's absolutely incredible, and he nailed it every time. There were maybe 5 drawings out of the 26 that I asked for revisions on when he showed me the initial sketches. Not many.
What does anybody else want to say anything about the art before we go on? Anything about how it struck you as you saw how your work was envisioned?
This is where one of you goes and says, "That was shit. It wasn't what I thought at all."
I was blown away. Like
perfect.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, like
go ahead, Wendy.
the scarecrow, like the pumpkin-headed scarecrow, was like exactly what I envisioned. The people were a lot better looking than I imagined, but their clothes were spot on. It was like wild.
Awesome.
I just want to get it framed. It looks so beautiful, and is pretty much exactly how I imagined it. So I'm very, very happy with what Christopher did for my story.
Cool.
Yeah, it was wild having like this custom artwork done, because I don't know, 80% live in the indie world, and a lot of the time we're doing Photoshop, not that that's not artwork, but it's very commercially oriented. Half the time I'm commissioning stuff for myself. So to have someone else be like making art about my work that I didn't have to pay them to do it, just was this really cool moment. And it's incredible artwork, like just sort of the retro, almost like schlocky old horror movie poster. It was incredible. It was so cool. I just want to echo, yeah, like I need to get a poster made of it at some point. Amazing.
Kay, I'm super glad you picked up on that, because that I discussed this with both Evangeline and with Christopher as we were going through it, and it was like, what I want for this, because it's a tropes anthology, what I want for this is very much like a artwork from Tales from the Crypt or Haunt of Fear or Vault of Horror, those types of old comics that I used to read when I was a kid, that are just full to the brim with the kinds of tropes that are reflected in the book.
Yeah,
and
like
so
the Pulp Fiction era come back to life.
Exactly. So that was the direction I was going with it. It's cool that you saw that.
All right, James.
So with that being said, and you wrote about tropes, I've got to also ask, are there any tropes you don't want to see anymore since you adapted these? Are there any, when you're watching, when you're reading, are there ever any times when you're like, please let's not go down that? We've talked about on the show before, like there's certain elements that have been played out, at least unless you have a unique vision or a unique take on it. We've talked on our show before about, zombies may be about done. Unless you're doing something new. We've had a lot of zombie fiction, unless you're doing something new. So since you've given us new spin on tropes, are there any tropes that as you think about, you're like, I don't want to see that one anymore? Turn this on its head a little bit.
Ooh, hard question.
And I can talk a little bit about it from having gone through these and selected them. And I wanted to be, as I was going through this, really, really open-minded about essentially any trope that anybody wanted to bring to me and about what constitutes a trope. Because when I was writing the submission guidelines for this, I went to like tvtropes.com and I was going to try to pinpoint some stuff and put it in the submission guidelines, and you literally can't. There's a billion tropes. Everything is a trope. And so there are tropes that annoy me when they're done in popular fiction. The cat jump scare is one that I hate. I hate it when a cat or a bird jumps out of a corner and just dissipates all of the tension that the filmmaker has intended. But there were 2 or 3, and I couldn't buy every story I wanted for this anthology. Unfortunately, it sucks that way. But there were actually 2 or 3 cat jump scare stories, and they were good. They were not. They were specifically aping the trope of cat jump scares, but they would make the cat the monster somehow, or they would do they would do something else creative with it. Some really cool stories did that. I'm not a huge fan of vampires as just a general genre of fiction, but everybody's got their likes and dislikes. But at the same time, one of the stories that made it in here was Gemma Files' story that is about her genuinely bizarre twist on a vampire. And so it's specifically she tried to do the exact opposite of a sparkly vampire. So those are I didn't want to, while there are tropes that when I see them in movies done the way they're usually done, I believe that the quality of the use of the trope depends on how it's done. So you can, it's not necessarily that I don't want to see it again. I just want to see it done differently.
That's good. Feel free, writers, to take this idea, because I'm not talented enough to do it. But the whole trope about somebody opening a medicine cabinet and closing it and the serial killer being there.
Or the ghost or the Candyman or whatever in the hell it is. It's always
have it where the serial killer is having a deep mental crisis because medicine cabinets don't fucking exist anymore.
Dude.
And so he can no longer murder.
You read my mind. I was just about to say that.
There you go.
They're going extinct. They're a dying breed.
Yeah. So there's your idea for the next short story. Thank you. You're welcome.
And that will be at our anthology, Fuck Mountain. Let's just bring it all the way back. All the way back. all the way back. Well, are there things that you all hate? Chad's also bored of vampires, and I'm kind of done with zombies and superheroes. Superheroes aren't really part of this, but I'm kind of superheroed out. So,
Well, Joe, you're also
Man.
done with Robin Hood. You've mentioned that several times.
oh
We
my
don't
God,
need
we
any more Robin
all
Hood.
No, I'm
should
done with
be.
Robin
We
Hood.
all should be done with Robin Hood. No, we're done. We're done.
And Peter Pan should be thrown on a stake and set on fire.
Oh my God, Peter Pan's another one. We're done, folks. We're done. Yeah, sorry. What about writers? Anything else that you're kind of tired of or you don't particularly like?
Okay, I think personally for me, what makes a trope bad usually isn't the trope, it's the shallowness of the execution. Like you can have, you know what, I'll even say like, okay, let's take vampires. I'm with you. Vampires as they are, especially the sexy kind. But if you take that and you put a twist on it, or even put like some thought into it, it's just, you can't just put a cardboard cutout of a trope in any piece of fiction and expect it to be something besides shallow. You need to give consideration to character, you need to add depth. I will say, I think one of my least favorite tropes that I see is the evil, man-hating lesbian who like goes after men, and it's like we're supposed to root for that. That drives me nuts. It's like, no, this is a person going after other people. I'm not going to root for that just because it's a woman. Insert shallow quip about girl power. Like,
Okay.
I mean, I think that's a great point because there's this idea now of comfort tropes, right? Like you'll see a freaking Twitter thread go around every week about this. What's your comfort trope? And there's marketing to that. There's the commercialization of that. And if it's your thing, like I'm sure there's someone out there that is just hoovering up every zombie story that comes out, and like power to them. I mean, that's great that, you know, there's a market need being filled. But you're definitely right that if that's not your thing, you can feel the difference between like, you're just throwing this on the screen or on the page for me, and it's not doing any heavy lifting. That's why I do want to see something a little fresh. You know, have fun with it, make it creepy, like put some emotion behind it, and that'll give it a little extra life while we're on the topic of zombies.
Kay, you know how I know you're from Canada. She said hoovering up, and it just made me smile so much.
You know why? I had to
I
learn to use
love-
that word because I worked in Scotland for a number of months, and they would laugh so hard every time I said vacuum.
Vacuum and hoovering. I
Broke
loved
me of
it.
it.
Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. That's okay. Listen to us. The Boneheads are from Kentucky, and we sound like it. All right,
You know,
James.
ask me where you check out books. Libraries.
Library.
He doesn't say that.
I can't say, if I say it too fast, it comes out library.
That's
I
okay.
have to watch my words.
If you say all the letters, you're not from the South, man.
Also,
Yeah.
also,
any word that ends in ed.
yes.
Yep.
Or if it has
Without-
that
with the T.
elongated vowel, like cooler, like you put 14 O's in cooler for some odd reason. It's cooler. All right, but Kay, also I was thinking of Letterkenny. Anyway, James, you have one last question.
Yeah, because I know we're about an hour, but I did want to say, so you all have obviously written horror, but if not horror, what? So, you know, what is it if you're not in horror? You mentioned science fiction got mentioned, which is one of my favorite things ever, but I couldn't write it with a gun to my head because my mind doesn't work that. I love to watch it, or read it, but I can't function that way.
Let's
So
prove it.
if
Who has a
not-
revolver?
Pull the trigger. Let's end this. Let's get it over with. But anyway,
American.
yeah. But so yeah,
I watched
so if-
Brandon move his hand over to the left, and I got scared. Like the
yeah.
It was
Let's
for
see
the
how-
pen. I promise. It's for a pen.
Let's see how the telecommunication works. Anyway, no, but so if not, I mean, if you're not in horror, if you're not writing horror or watching horror or reading horror, what is your other thing that you go to? I'm just actually curious because I think we all have those different things that we bounce to depending on our mood. And so I was just curious, what else is there?
I don't know if this is a cheap answer because I mean there's so much overlap, but weird fiction is another place where I feel like my heart lands. I love fiction that I guess explores the strange, ambiguous, and not necessarily like nonsensical, but things that are like hard to rationally parse. And a lot of times that does end up being horror, but not always. And I think that one of the things I really love about weird fiction is that that sense of wonder that comes with it. There's I don't know, something that is it's hard to do right. But when I feel like I do it right on those rare occasions, I feel very happy about what I've written. And yeah, so that would be my semi-cheat answer. Weird
No,
fiction.
well, so what would be some weird fiction that you would recommend? Let me put you on the spot with that. So what if we have some listeners that are like, oh, I want to explore this weird fiction?
Yeah.
What would be some things that would jump to mind?
I guess as far as things I read in the past year, Michael Sisko's collection Anti-Societies was probably my favorite collection of weird fiction that I've read recently. There are some stories in there that are just so wonderfully strange and haunting because of that strangeness that I think that is going to be the one that I recommend. I don't know that I'll be able to come up with others right off the top of my head, but Paula D.
Eric,
Ashe,
I was gonna ask really quick, Eric, would you call Bunny, the Mona Awad book, Awad book, would you call it weird or would you call it horror?
It's got weirdness to it. I don't know. That's such a like I don't know. That's a puzzling one because it's kind of saying fuck you to genre in general.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do love that one though.
Is there a movie example of what you're talking about?
I'm sure there are plenty. I guess one that I watched it actually for the first time probably in the past year and a half. I know this is kind of an old one, but I just love it. In the Mouth of Madness.
John Carpenter.
The John Carpenter movie.
Yeah, dude,
is
all three of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a stellar movie.
It's his last masterpiece.
I'd also
really great.
say a good work of the weird is, for movie wise, is Eraserhead.
Yeah.
Pretty much anything that David Lynch does is weird.
That's true. You know, I was thinking, have any of you, when you were talking about that, Eric, I was thinking of this movie I watched a while back, and I did a thing for it, and they're coming to Scarefest, which I moderate in October, the couple of the stars. Did anybody see The Greasy Strangler? I was thinking more of that for weird fiction.
I haven't seen it.
Oh my God.
I've heard many intense reactions to it, but I've not seen it.
They're all true. It's like Eraserhead. There's all these reactions and they're all accurate. Does that make sense, Wendy? Don't you think? If you hate it or you love it, they're all accurate. They're all valid to Eraserhead. It's the same thing with Greasy Strangler. Only Greasy Strangler is not beautiful like Eraserhead's beautiful. What was James's question?
What else other than horror?
I gotta admit, I read a lot and write sometimes nonfiction about like nature, so like nature writing and stuff like that, environmental literature.
Oh, that's
well,
cool.
isn't that, I mean, given everything that nature, we're getting payback now. Isn't what nature doing us a good setup for horror anyway? I mean, we're kind of getting paid back.
That just kind of popped into my head. I was like, there's a very narrow, fine line between those two subjects. Yeah, so that and science fiction are things that I tend to write a lot of when I'm not writing horror.
I have a horrible time with defining genre, actually. It's a bit miserable. I tend to position as like fantasy with an edge and play in that pool just because it's what I've most known historically and I hope what will sell. But there's all these different terms now, and fabulous. You have magical realism, which is more of a kind of national thing, South American thing. But weird is another one. I'm seeing weird and eldritch overlap a lot, but kind of those like liminal in between. I do not know how to write solidly in a genre, so I'll have like science fantasy elements and a lot of eco-punk. I hear you on the climate fiction. It's hard not to put something in these days. I guess it's just of everything right now, and so there's definitely that going on. And I was doing a Diana Wynne Jones like reading from her first to last published book. I know, right? Yeah, that is the correct reaction. But if you go back and read her books, she's a children's writer from the UK, if you're not familiar, mostly children's writer. Children's fiction used to be so much weirder, guys. It was so amazing. And she was this incredibly brilliant writer, but she was in an era where she was practically defining the trajectory of children's literature and genre at the time. And she wrote, did essays on that topic. and really bemoaned this movement towards trying to like pin down genre. And she talked about how when she was young, so much of children's fiction was really like morality tales. It was supposed to be good for you. It's supposed to be educational. And then there's this rise, and Tolkien was, really kicking that off of like fantasy, of speculative fiction. And now we're kind of coming back and trying to stick things in boxes. And she hated that. And I'm inclined to agree. I'm inclined to go like, why not just play with that full scope at any given time? And it's going to confuse readers, and some of them are going to be mad about that. And that is okay. I'm okay with that. I don't know. I can't help making readers uncomfortable, so I'm just going to embrace it.
Well, I was going to say, and actually, I wasn't kidding earlier when I said The Last Unicorn messed me up as a kid, and I still haven't watched it as an adult. I will not go back to it. I grew up on a farm as well, and we had cattle, so that flaming bull scarred me for life. Like, it was one of those
skeleton on top of the fireplace, man.
No, that was fine. Skeletons, they're dead. They're not moving. But I could look out my window and see a herd of cattle, including that bull, that inevitably, when I looked out the window, would be looking right in the window.
I'm sorry, but the breasted bird is what freaked me out more than anything in that movie.
That's a whole other issue. But really quick,
Yeah,
we've got three.
Chad.
We've got three young faces who have no idea what the hell we're talking about when we're talking about The Last Unicorn. No offense, Drew. You have the perfect reaction face, so that's okay.
Drew, go watch The Last Unicorn.
The three of you, Eric.
Oh, it's
Drew,
got a
and
phenomenal
Ted.
cast. The voice talent is phenomenal.
Wendy's
And the
face
book
was,
is
oh my
fabulous.
god, yeah. And
Beagle,
I've
Beagle's book.
I've read the book and seen the movie like more times than I can count. I love it. It was a favorite growing up as a kid.
but Wendy,
But it's
looking at
Scarred
you,
me
you
for
were so excited, and Drew was like, just faking it, just totally faking it. It's great. Go check it out.
I just, I think our fiction should be scarring children more than real life. That's a balance that we should aim for in our world.
Movies are not
Let's move
made the
towards
way they
that.
used to be for
Yes.
children.
Yes.
PG used to mean something.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Gremlins is PG. Poltergeist was PG.
Well, and actually, I like that point too, that kids need to be scarred, because I think one thing that happens with fiction that doesn't scar children is it makes them think that they're immune from scarring.
Mhm.
And one of the things, my kids fell in love with the Wings of Fire series, Tui Sutherland, about dragons, and it's told from the dragon's point of view. But what I've enjoyed about them reading that is they get hurt all the time. And like,
Yeah.
it's not like, oh, they'll be better by the next book. No, one of them ends up blinded, one of them ends up. And so this idea of, like, my kids are now like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't play with fire. I probably shouldn't, run
His-
into that place where people have told me not to go.
His kid is
Now, I still
25
give
and
them-
27 though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but
Better
they're
late
my
than never.
kids. They're
Late
my
than
But
never.
that's-
kids. The bar is
That's
low.
what's-
Well,
That's
but
what's so great about fiction. It's like it lets you practice stuff. Like that's why I love horror. You get to practice being scared. You get to practice being evil. You get to practice dealing with evil. And if we don't have fiction that's willing to give us that, like, how are we going to be ready for it when it hits us in the real world? And kids are they're looking at a world that's going to be much tougher than what I grew up with. I mean, sure, we had lawn darts, but like, I don't know if that's nearly as scary as school shooters. So
It
I would
is
say,
not.
but we
Not.
outlawed lawn darts, and that has saved everybody. Thank goodness America took a stand and said lawn darts, no.
that's something to be glad about, right?
well,
I think my parents still technically own a band set. Shh. We
Well,
keep
and
them
James-
behind the 400 rifles.
James, I could tell you the other part about this too, from experience, is that if you don't allow to explore these different genres and things that scare them and things that hit them emotionally and potentially I mean, to use your word, scarring ways, they'll seek it out themselves. My oldest daughter is somebody who reacted really negatively to scary stuff when she was little. And so we spent a lot of time, and I regret this actually, we spent a lot of time sort of sanitizing her input, right? Because we didn't want her to get too scared. She got scared really bad a couple of times, and we were like, nope, don't want to do that. Don't want to wake up 45 times a night with nightmares, all this different stuff. So we're just going to sanitize the input. as soon as she got a hold of YouTube, the first thing she started seeking out was creepypastas. Like it was just immediate. And she's somebody who I watched. She's 10 years old. And I watch scary movies with her now, but she built her own tolerance for it in absence of my allowing it to happen. So, you know, they'll seek it out if you don't let them have it.
Well, I think that's one of the good things about reading as well. And I'm not anti-horror movie, obviously, but I think reading horror, I control the imagery, right? And sometimes that's not to my good.
Detriment.
Because sometimes
the word is you're looking for is detriment.
That would be the word. Yes, thank you.
PhD.
Not in detrimental sciences, in something else. But anyway, but you know, I think that, and I think that's why horror is so important, though, is because I get to envision it how I want to, and that grows with me. And quite frankly, it's one of the things Joe and I and Chad have had this conversation before. Going back to Stephen King and going back to movie adaptations, that scene in Pet Sematary where Gage meets an unhappy ending plays different to me now than it did when I was 18, because now I have two things that technically, according to the state, I'm supposed to care for. And if something happens to them, I get a phone call.
All right. Not to wrap this up, but we didn't get Drew's answer, and I need to know the cat's name.
Oh, this one's Bliss.
What's his name?
Bliss.
Bliss.
Like
oh, you cute. All right.
The other one's Soul for Soul Eater, just to, you know, balance things out.
Soul Eater.
Gotta balance it out. Is Soul Eater a black cat?
He's got a darker coloring, dark face. Yeah. He looks
That
grumpy.
makes sense. That clocks. That makes a lot of sense.
All right.
Okay.
What was your answer, Drew?
This is gonna sound a little weird. So writing, if it's not straight horror, I kind of will genre bend, dark fantasy. I've got one or two things, short stories out getting published that I think are a little more on the dark fantasy, dark Western side that I'm pretty proud of. But reading, watching, 1940 stuff. It's super embarrassing. I don't know why, but I will just reread Raymond Chandler, James M. Cain,
That's not
like
embarrassing.
none other.
Yeah.
I've read like 18 out of the 22 Travis McGee's. Just, it's my comfort food. I like period stuff, but you know, the prose, I'm a sucker for good prose.
Yeah.
The darkness, the moral ambiguity.
That's not embarrassing at all. It's not.
And I like stuff where things actually happen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I can't get into literary fiction, most of it. I'm just like, look, both my parents are pretty blue collar. I was raised pretty blue collar. So when I read a story, I want to read about characters that are doing things, being proactive, having like real thoughts and feelings, and not like wondering about the nature of existence for the 20th time on a Sunday.
Drew, I do this. Do you ever read something that's literary fiction and the whole time you're waiting for the monster to jump out? Because I do it
Yes.
constantly.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my God. Now,
in between wanting to throttle the protagonist, I'm like, dude, okay, I used to do hotel housekeeping as a job. I used to like clean toilets. Like I used to work in the trades for Pete's sake.
No,
So
you
I'm
could
just
say the
looking
other
for-
word.
For fuck's sake. Like my old job, I had to be there at 6 a.m. I was up at 4:30. I was working 10-hour shifts, and I'm just looking at these literary protagonists that are just complaining that like, oh, my mother looked at me funny the other day. This reminds me of my childhood. I need to have a 20-page long flashback. Oh no, told in pretentious flowery prose. Oh, I'm just like, holy fuck, dude. Holy fuck. I don't care. Do something cool. I want a monster to come. Okay, you know what? And sometimes I have a hard time getting into Shirley Jackson's longer stuff because it's like you said, like I read The Haunting of Hill House, and the whole time I hated all of the characters so much that I was kind of rooting for the house.
Oh my
I was
God,
like,
Drew. Dude, Chad James. And finally somebody agrees with me. No, this has
Yes,
been on
I'm
the
like,
show.
I hate all of these. They're all terrible people. Go House. House is doing something. think
I can't stand her. I always get so aggravated. In fact, I prefer the
Yes.
movie. I prefer the movie
the
much more than
movie.
the.
I prefer the shitty movie, the shitty schlocky movie.
Okay,
to
I don't know
book.
that. I don't know that. But my favorite haunted house is Hell House by Richard Matheson, and I've made this comment several times on here that I
So
prefer.
good.
It's so good, and I love the movie. The original one sheet for the picture with Roddy McDowell in it from the 70s is over here on the other side. No, but sorry, Drew. We've got something in common.
I had to say it.
I
I
don't-
had to say it.
I
man.
don't hate the haunting. I just don't give two shits about the protagonist, like you're saying. She just needs to. I just can't stand her whining.
I
It
by
does-
the way,
Nobody's
go ahead.
good. None of the characters are good. The protagonist isn't good. The whiny other three people whose names I can't even remember
Right.
because they're just whiny cardboard cutouts are not good.
Yeah.
Just no. Go Murder House. Team Murder House for life.
By the way, though, the commentary on the literary, now I'm sitting there thinking about the literary works that I do like, and I'm like, what monster could I build into Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky that could really jazz it up? What sort of creature should I have come out that, Raskolnikov's going to have to deal with that? Sorry.
I feel like
Oh,
Crime and Punishment has enough axe murder. That's
It's one of literally,
you get some of that.
I trained to teach high school English before I went back and got other degrees because I realized I hated high school the first time and didn't belong as a teacher. That being said, it was the only work that I was like, because they had us read Moby Dick, and I was like, yeah, the whale's right. I don't care about anybody else. The whale, like, oh, everybody else is going to die. Spoiler. Okay, cool. But at least with Crime and Punishment, I'm like, okay. I mean, he killed somebody, as you said. There's enough axe murder.
Mhm.
And then he's dealing with, oh yeah, now I've got to realize what I've done, and I can only rationalize it so long before I have to take some ownership. So it's one of the only quote unquote literary where I can go into a scholarly conversation and fake my way, and then they're like, well, what did you think about, I don't know, the Fairy Queen by oh, I don't know. I'm done. I'm gonna go over here and get a snack. That's it.
Speaking of being done, James Thomas, let's
I
wrap
know,
it
I
up
know.
so people can go out and do whatever. I mean, Wendy has to go party. Drew has to drink. Kay's already drinking. Eric, he's going to go out and drink more. And Brandon, you're just going to dry click that revolver, I'm assuming, sir. I don't know, whatever it is you were reaching for earlier. I don't know what you're doing. Let's make it dark.
Just
Anyway,
a pen. Don't worry. Just
Right.
a pen.
Before we go though, Brandon, when is the book coming out? Let's talk about all the this to sell the stuff.
Absolutely. It is called It Was All a Dream, an anthology of bad horror tropes done right. It's out October 18th. Pretty much anywhere you can buy books online. We're going through Ingram Spark, so it's Amazon, it's Barnes and Noble, it's my own website, hungryshadowpress.com, it's bookshop.org, all those places you'll be able to get it there, and it'll be available in hardback, paperback, and ebook formats. So however you want to read it, you can read it, and yeah, you can actually pre-order it now. So hungryshadowpress.com, pre-order it there, or wait till your bookstore of choice has their product detail page up.
That sounds
And
great.
if they order it off of hungryshadowpress.com, saying that one more time,
Yeah.
I believe they can get you to sign it before it's shipped. Is that correct?
There is a checkbox that says signed by the editor. I will sign it. I don't know if anybody wants that. A couple of people have said they do so far, so yay for that. But yeah, I will do that.
If we ask for you to sign something specifically, is there like a checkbox and then I want him to write to his loving bear from Kentucky?
Joe, I would do that for you, but you got to DM me about it.
All right. That's fine. Sorry. Now, before we go, I want to go around and get everybody's. So if your people want to read more of your stuff, where they can find your stuff and where they can find you out on the social medias. Okay. We're going to start with Eric. Eric, go, because I feel like I left you towards the end every time.
Sure, yeah. So you can find me on Twitter at Eric Ragland 1992. As far as things I have out or things I have coming out, Nightmare Uranians, my first collection, has been out for about a year. I just edited and released a collection of sports and fitness body horror fiction called Shredded. That's really, really good and has actually one of Brandon's stories in it. And I have my second collection, which is really fucking bleak and good, called Extinction Hymns, coming out in December. So yeah, and that's through Brigid's Gate Press. Brigid's. God, Brandon, help me out.
I'm
Do you
gonna go
remember?
with Brigid's. I'm going with
Brigid's,
Brigid's.
cool. That's good.
Although Alex said Brigid's the other day, so yeah.
Okay.
So
I don't
will
know.
is-
Anyway, buy the book.
will Extinction Hymns be out in time for the holidays? I need something I can give people.
If you want to make them depressed, then yeah.
That's
I don't know
usually
the
what I
exact
do for the holidays.
release date.
Well, I was really excited that I thought the title was really fucking bleak, and I was like, "Oh my god, I gotta buy really fucking bleak."
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
bleak book. So
For the actual title. All right, KA.
Yeah. So on just about all the social channels, KSpace, that's KAIESPACE, kawiggins.com for the website. I have a finished YA trilogy. It pretends to be fantasy. It has a lot of body horror, a lot of angst, a lot of gothic crap going on. And it's monsters and climate change come for Vancouver 100 years in the future. I should have an adult series coming out maybe later this year, probably next year, and a spooky haunted basement cave middle grade coming out hopefully next year. So lots going on. Short fiction is mostly horror, lots of body horror. So if that's your jam, you can also check that out there.
Cool. Thank you. Drew.
Okay, so I'm gonna mention the website. It looks really pretty, but I haven't updated it in a while. It's got like a little synopsis for Freeburn. Drew E. Huff at Hotmail, or DrewEHuff.com. Mostly I'm on Twitter, but I'm not like on Twitter a lot. I'm not really a social media person, but I do try to keep things updated. Dreadnought, subscript Drew, DRU. For short fiction, I have a short story coming out in Death's Head Press's Western anthology, Hot Iron and Cold Blood. I'm really proud of it. It's definitely not quite like this one, but it's pretty good. I'm very proud of it. And I actually have two other pieces getting published, both of them by Night Terror Novels. I've got one, lots of body horror. It's getting published in their homeless charity anthology. There used to be a house here. That one's coming out fairly soon. And actually, I have a piece that's going to be in Theater Phantasmagoria sometime in September this month. Just a little quick piece of flash fiction. Now, right now, I am mostly I'm working on a new novel, and I'm trying to shop around my novel manuscript, Freeburn. Freeburn is fucking insane. So it's well written, just needs to find a home. But I'll say this, if you liked It Wasn't a Wedding Cake, you're gonna fucking love Freeburn. Same voice, no, not quite the same voice, but same vibe.
All right, great. And last but not least, Miss Wagner, Wendy Wagner.
Well, my website is the ridiculously named winnywoohoo.com.
Hold on. Is it Winnie Woohoo or Wendy Woohoo?
Winnie Woohoo, WINNIEWOOHOO.com. It's easier to find me probably on Twitter at WN Wagner. Every month, my magazine comes out. It's nightmare-magazine.com. My novel, The Deer Kings, you can find that at Amazon or Barnes and Noble, things like that. So if you're into like a kids on bikes kind of vibe mixed with like folk horror, scary cults, and football, so you can find that out in the world. My novella, The Secret Skin, is similarly at like bookstores all around. It was actually a Washington Post year's best science fiction / fantasy / horror pick last year. And I'm just trying to sell my most recent novel. I've got a handful of other short stories coming out at some point. So yeah, hopefully people will find me on Twitter and catch up with all of my stuff.
And Brandon, where can we find you? Dead in a ditch.
Probably no.
On a
I'm on
side of
Twitter.
the road. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's all right. I'm on Twitter for my writing stuff. I'm at Brandon Applegate, but 8 is an 8, so G and the number 8. For the press stuff, like for like this book, I'm on at Hungry Shadow 1 on Twitter. I'm on Instagram at Hungry Shadow Press. I am newly on Facebook, sort of reluctantly. I don't really like Facebook, but I had to do it for the Instagram stuff. And 2 websites, hungryshadowpress.com and bapplegate.com or bapplegate.com, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And you can pick up my short story collection, Those We Left Behind and Other Sacrifices, which we've talked about before, or pre-order this book, which is going to be great. And it includes stories from all the wonderful people we've talked to today. A forward by Laird Barron, yet another hero I got to work with a little bit, and a lot of incredible stories. So yeah.
All right. Well, we want to thank you all so much for coming on Bonehead Weekly. I hope you've had a decent time. I want you all, if you're listening or watching, to go out, pick up a copy in October of It Was All a Dream, an anthology of bad horror tropes done right. This has been Bonehead Weekly.